You spent 3 years playing nurse. I spent 3 months playing smart. My brother leaned those words across a mahogany conference table like he was tipping a dealer, quiet and deliberate, making sure only I could hear them. On the other side of that table, my grandfather's estate attorney was still reading from a revised document, dated 8 months before my grandfather's death. The house in Scottsdale, the investment portfolio, the savings account opened in 1982 with money my grandfather had earned, working double shifts at a sheet metal plant before he ever owned anything worth saving. All of it had been redirected. Every dollar, every asset, every acre. I had been left a single line near the bottom of the page. To my granddaughter Leah, with love. No amount, just the words. Love written down like a receipt for something that had already been taken. My brother smoothed his jacket and reached for the water glass in front of him. And I watched him the way you watch someone who has just shown you exactly who they are, and is not even trying to pretend otherwise. Before I tell you what happened in a probate courtroom 6 weeks after that afternoon, I want to ask you something. Tell me in the comments. Has someone in your family ever counted on you not fighting back? I read every story you leave me, every single one. I did not cry in that office. I have learned not to spend emotion in rooms where it will be used against me later. I am Leah. I am 31 years old, and I have been a licensed CPA for 5 years. My work is not glamorous. It is a box of financial records, a timeline, and enough patience to let the numbers tell you what the people involved were hoping you would not find. I am very good at this. I can look at a set of books and feel the moment something shifts, the way a musician hears a note played just slightly wrong. You develop a sense for it after long enough. What I was not good at for most of my life was using that sense on my own family. We rarely apply our professional skills to the people we love. It feels like an accusation. It feels like distrust. I understand now that those feelings are exactly what certain people rely on. My grandfather raised me from the time I was 11 years old. When my parents' marriage ended and my mother left for Portland, with someone she had been seeing for longer than she admitted, my grandfather arrived at our house on a Thursday afternoon, with his pickup truck and a thermos of coffee, and did not make me feel like a situation to be managed. He made me feel like someone worth rearranging his life for. He took me in without drama, without conditions, without ever once making me feel that I owed him something for it. He was a practical man who believed in two things: showing up and keeping records. He taught me to balance a checkbook when I was 12. He explained compound interest at 14 using a jar of pennies on the kitchen table. When I passed my CPA exam at 26, he cried before I did, and he kept the photo from that day in a frame on his bookshelf until the end. For the last 3 years of his life, he was not himself in the way he had always been himself. The dementia came slowly. The way his neurologist described it, like water filling a glass you didn't know how to crack. First it was small things, keys in the wrong drawer, names that took a moment longer to find. Then it was larger things, the sequence of a conversation, the plot of a movie, what he had said 20 minutes ago. I drove him to every appointment. I managed his finances under the durable power of attorney he had signed in a period of lucidity, when he still understood exactly what he was authorizing and why. I organized his medications in a weekly tray and refilled it every Sunday morning. I sat with him on Sunday afternoons when the television stopped making sense to him and he just wanted someone in the room. He called me Leah every single time, right up until the end. He never forgot my name. I think about that. My brother is 6 years older than me. He lives in Denver. He has 2 children I have met 4 times, and a career in commercial real estate that he describes at family gatherings in terms designed to imply more success than the specifics would support. In 3 years, he visited my grandfather twice. Once at Christmas, once in the spring of the second year, when he stayed for 4 days, and helped my grandfather sort through some old paperwork in the study. I remember thinking at the time that it was kind of him. I remember thinking it was good that he had finally made the time. I understand now what that visit was for. I drove home from the estate attorney's office with the radio off, and my hands very steady on the wheel. The revised will had been dated 8 months before my grandfather's death. I knew my grandfather's medical history in precise detail, because I had been present for every appointment and I kept a folder in my filing cabinet with every clinical note, every assessment, every neurologist's report. I had kept these records the way I keep any records, systematically, completely, without knowing exactly when they would matter. I sat down at my kitchen table, opened the filing cabinet, and pulled out the medical folder. The neurologist's assessment from 10 months before his death, 2 months before the revised will was signed, used language I had read before but now read again very carefully. Patient demonstrates significant impairment in executive function, short-term memory and decision-making capacity. Patient should not be expected to independently manage complex financial or legal decisions. I put that document to one side. Then I opened the folder containing his financial statements. I still had access to his investment accounts from the period of my authorized POA, and I began going through the transaction history, the way I go through any transaction history. Line by line, in chronological order, looking for the place where the pattern breaks. I found it in less than an hour. Between the date on the revised will and the date of my grandfather's death 8 months later, A total of $183,000 had moved out of his investment portfolio in 6 separate transactions. The receiving account was listed under a business entity I had never heard of, Westbridge Capital Consulting LLC. I opened my laptop and searched the Colorado Business Registry. The registered agent for Westbridge Capital Consulting LLC was my brother. I sat with that for a moment. The emotion was there. It is always there. But it moved to a different room and waited while I kept working. I have trained myself to do this. You finish the audit before you decide what it means. The transfers had each been authorized under a power of attorney. I pulled out my own copy of my grandfather's original durable POA and confirmed what I already knew. It authorized me as his agent, had been properly executed with his full cognitive participation, and made no mention of my brother. So I called the county recorder's office first thing the next morning. I asked whether any additional POA filings existed for my grandfather in the previous 2 years. There was one, filed 14 months before his death. My brother had obtained a second power of attorney. The document had been drafted by an attorney in Denver, who had never met my grandfather in person, who had conducted no capacity evaluation, and who had obtained a notarized signature by mailing the document across state lines and receiving it back by return mail. 14 months before my grandfather's death. 12 months into a cognitive decline, his own neurologist had documented in writing. I stacked the documents in a pile on my kitchen table. Medical records, bank statements, LLC registration, POA filing, the original neurologist's assessment with its careful clinical language about decision-making capacity. Then I made a list of every number that had moved, and every date it had moved, and drew a single line, connecting those dates to the medical record dates. The math was not complicated, it was damning. My phone rang at 9:45 that night, my mother. She lives in Portland. She did not visit my grandfather in the last 18 months of his life. She sent cards at Christmas, which he received with the polite gratitude of someone who has learned not to expect more. She and my brother have always been close in the way of people who agree not to examine things too carefully. I answered. Leah. Her voice had a particular flatness I recognized. The tone of someone who has already made a decision and is now delivering it. Your brother called me this evening. He says you're planning to challenge the estate. I'm still gathering information, I said. He says you've always resented him. He says this is about competition, not about your grandfather. I looked at the stack of documents spread across my kitchen table. The bank transfers, the neurologist's assessment, the LLC registration with my brother's name on it. Mom, I said, do you know what month the revised will was signed? I don't see why that matters. It was signed 8 months before he died. His neurologist documented that he lacked decision-making capacity 2 months before that date. She paused. I waited. He still knew who we all were, she said. He was still himself. Recognizing people and being legally capable of signing binding financial documents are not the same thing, I said. You know that. Your brother has children, she said, and her voice began to rise. He has a family to support. Your grandfather understood what responsibility looks like. You've always been so focused on yourself, on your career, on your little apartment. You never understood what it means to have real obligations. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I thought about Sunday afternoons in that living room in Scottsdale. My grandfather reaching for words that had started moving just out of reach. Patient with himself the way he was patient with everything. Reaching for the remote, reaching for my name, always finding my name. I managed his accounts, I said. I attended every medical appointment. I refilled his medication every week for 3 years. If you want to have a conversation about obligation, I'm available for it. She told me I was being selfish. She told me I was making things ugly. She told me that my grandfather had loved my brother and that I was disrespecting his memory by questioning his choices. I did not argue with any of this. I had learned, years ago, that arguing with my mother about my brother is like arguing with a locked door about whether it should be open. Good night, Mom, I said. I hung up. Then I called Carmen. Carmen is an elder law attorney I had met at a continuing education conference 2 years earlier. We had kept in touch in the occasional way of professional acquaintances who respect each other's work without needing to be in constant contact. When I laid out the timeline for her that night, the neurologist's reports, the second POA, the LLC's $183,000, the dates lined up against each other. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, send me everything you have tonight if you can. I'll have a preliminary read by Wednesday. Then she said, Leah, what you're describing isn't just a will contest. Executing financial transfers under a fraudulently obtained power of attorney, while the principal lacks documented legal capacity. That's elder financial abuse under state statute. There's a criminal referral pathway here. I sent her the files that night in a single compressed folder organized by category and date. 2 days later, my brother texted me. You really think you can make something out of this? The will is valid. He loved me. He wanted to take care of my family. You're embarrassing yourself and you're going to lose. Let it go. I read it twice. Then I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Carmen with a single line. He knows I'm looking. She called me back within the hour. That message tells me something important, she said. He isn't denying the transfers. He's defending the will. Those are two separate arguments and he's only making one of them. The transfers don't appear in his text at all. She was right. He did not say I didn't move the money. He said the will is valid. There is a difference between those two sentences, and the difference is significant. We filed in probate court 3 weeks later. The morning of the hearing, I wore a gray blazer and carried a document box I had organized myself, 217 pages tabbed and indexed. Dates, amounts, clinical language, registration records, everything in the order it would need to be referenced. My brother arrived with a downtown attorney, and the same expression he'd had in the estate office, assured, a little bored, slightly above the proceedings. He sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, and did not acknowledge me when I walked in. The first 20 minutes were standard. His attorney presented the revised will. Proper signatures, proper witnesses, proper notarization. They made it look clean. They were good at making it look clean. Then, Carmen began. She submitted the full record of my grandfather's neurological assessments for the 18 months preceding his death, with the clinical documentation of his cognitive declines cross-referenced against the date the revised will was signed. She submitted the written testimony of his primary care physician, whose notes from 6 months before the will signing read, "Patient is not a reliable reporter of his own financial circumstances, and cannot be expected to make sound, independent legal or financial judgments." She submitted the second POA and the record of its drafting, the Denver attorney the mailed document, the absence of any capacity evaluation, the absence of any in-person meeting. She submitted the business registry filing for Westbridge Capital Consulting LLC with my brother's name as registered agent. She submitted the 6 transfer records totaling $183,000, each one executed under the second POA during the period after the will revision. And then she submitted the screenshot of my brother's text message. His attorney objected on relevance grounds. The judge reviewed it for a moment and admitted it. I watched my brother's face from across the room. The assurance he had walked in wearing was not a permanent fixture. It was dependent on the room going the way he had calculated it would go. Courtrooms are full of people who miscalculated. The judge spent several minutes reviewing the materials without speaking. When she looked up, she addressed my brother's attorney directly. Was a formal capacity evaluation conducted prior to the power of attorney, dated 14 months before the decedent's death? His attorney said, "We were not in possession of the medical documentation at the time of drafting." The judge looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at the file. She voided the revised will on the grounds of testamentary incapacity and undue influence. She ordered a full forensic accounting of all transactions executed under the second power of attorney. She ordered the $183,000 to be held in court-supervised escrow, pending the accounting review. And she referred the matter to the State Attorney General's office for a review of potential elder financial abuse. My brother stood up. His chair scraped back against the floor, and several people in the gallery turned to look. He said nothing to the judge. He looked at me. I thought about what he had said in the estate attorney's office. "You spent 3 years playing nurse. I spent 3 months playing smart. You counted on me not being the kind of person who keeps records," I said. "That was your mistake." Outside the courthouse, the April air was warm and clean, in the way Phoenix sometimes manages when the desert isn't reminding you who's in charge. I sat on a bench near the entrance and held my document box in my lap. Underneath the organized tabs and the indexed pages, I had brought a photograph. I hadn't planned to bring it. I had taken it from my desk that morning without entirely thinking about why. My grandfather and me at my graduation. Him in his good gray suit. Both of us squinting into the sun. He had that expression he got when he was proud of something, and trying not to be obvious about it. The kind of pride that sits right at the surface and gets caught on camera when you're not guarding it. He had trusted his family. He had been sitting in his living room in Scottsdale, not entirely sure what month it was, and someone had mailed him a document and put a pen in his hand. He had probably signed it the way he signed everything in those last years, carefully, slowly, wanting to be helpful, wanting not to be a burden, trusting that the people who loved him had good intentions. That trust was not naive, it was generous, and it was used against him. My mother did not come to the hearing. She had sent a message that morning that said, "I hope you know what you're doing to this family." I had read it and set my phone face down and driven to the courthouse. My brother's attorney has since contacted Carmen twice about a settlement. Carmen has said, both times, that we will see what the Attorney General's office determines before any conversations about resolution take place. The forensic accounting is ongoing. The criminal referral is under review. I changed my phone number. My mother has my email if she wants it. I have my grandfather's photograph on my desk now, next to the frame that used to hold my CPA certificate. I moved the certificate to make room. Priorities clarify over time. I spent 3 years showing up because he had shown up for me when I was 11 years old, and I didn't need any reason beyond that. Not an inheritance. Not recognition, not credit. I showed up because that is what you do for the people who matter to you, and he had mattered to me completely. My brother believed that made me the one who wasn't paying attention. He believed that the person who works from love, instead of strategy, is the person who can be outmaneuvered. He had looked across that table at a woman who organized his grandfather's medications every Sunday, and decided she was not a threat. He didn't know what I do for a living. He didn't know what I am trained to see. I have learned that there are two kinds of people in difficult families. There are the ones who extract and the ones who maintain. The ones who take, and the ones who stay. The takers have always assumed that the ones who stay are staying because they have no other options. They mistake steadiness for weakness. They mistake patience for passivity. They are always surprised when the person who stayed turns out to have been paying attention the entire time. I used to believe the hardest part of being the one who showed up was doing the work without being acknowledged. Now I know the hardest part is the moment you realize that someone was watching you show up and calculating how to use it. That the love you gave freely was being treated as a resource to be harvested. The hardest part is seeing that clearly. And then deciding to keep your records anyway. If you've ever been erased by someone who was counting on you to disappear quietly, leave the word present in the comments below. And if you know someone who needs to hear that being the one who stayed doesn't mean you have to stay silent, share this with them. I'll see you in the next one.